order to open these doors, we do not say open sesame. We say open Biden. That's our magic word. Open Biden. I love it.
Wasn't that lovely, everybody? Biden passes more executive orders than anybody else in the first few months of their presidency. We go over Biden's tax plan and Biden's stimulus bill. But first, everybody grab your drink, let's sit back, and enjoy the intro. Unconfirmed, but I'm fairly certain we have a necromancer in the White House right now who can only allow Biden to move for about 10 minutes at a time. Perhaps this is why the CDC set out the zombie preparedness guidelines in February, just in case. Bigger controversies, somehow, are Biden's executive orders. We'll go through a few of the top average executive orders per year. 36 by Benjamin Harrison, 145 by Roosevelt, 181 by William Howard, 225 by Wilson, 217 by Harding. As you can see, we had a good streak of them here. Gets all the way up to 307 again with Roosevelt. Dropping down to Biden, we're at 400 plus on average per year at the going rate. Put that into perspective for you. Trump's was 55, Obama's was 35, and Bush's was 36, with Clinton having 46 per year. The issue is, as J.D. Shapiro puts it, and I do refuse to call him just Ben Shapiro, because the standard has been set by Dr. Joe Biden that we must always use the preface in front of everybody's name. So Juris Dr. Shapiro says, with these executive orders, it is more like we are just electing a new dictator every 4 years into office. It's a scary thing. Let's continue. Although this is a controversy, a lot of people say that what Biden is really doing is just undoing the laws and executive orders that Trump put into place, and therefore it's okay. The issue with this is that this is not all Biden is doing. He's putting in new laws. For instance, the LGBTQ rights executive order that Vox says phobic people are having a backlash to. They go through and explain this. Their explanations are something along the lines of, the religious conservative was also joined by several gender critics. I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to say gender anymore on YouTube, to be honest. Womanists in calling out Biden, accusing the new president of erasing women by including people under the definition of sex discrimination. Okay. But Biden's executive order, quote, is not an abandonment of his call for unity by any stretch of the imagination, says Brandstetter. It's frankly a little boilerplate because it's merely enforcing the Supreme Court's decision, as is the executive branch's constitutional duty. She also added that anti-activists have long, quote, been preparing for a broader media campaign aimed at convincing people that gender people pose a risk to cisgender people. Cisgender women. All white powerful men laugh in the corner. Oh yes, it's the white powerful men. In other words, it shouldn't be a surprise that anti-activists are accusing the man who chose Kamala Harris, the first ever female vice president in U.S. history. Don't you forget that. Very important. Of erasing women. But their attacks shouldn't take away from trans people receiving the critical protections they've long deserved. What are they leaving out? They say this is a backlash. This is it, guys. It's just them yelling at the sky saying, you're taking away from women. But how? Well, the real argument that conservatives are having is that this is going to affect sports teams. If it's illegal to fire on the basis of sex, then it's illegal to fire on the basis of sex identification, is the argument that the Supreme Court had made. Which means a trans woman can join the WNBA and absolutely smash the other team. There was even talk about the WNBA lowering the hoop down to 9 or 9.5 feet so that they could dunk on a regular basis. There's no need for that if it's going to be an all-man's team. Same with high school and college sports. I'm not too super involved in this argument, but the way that they're mischaracterizing the conservative argument is kind of disgusting. We've got a lot to cover here, so let's move on. We'll go through the tax plan very quickly. And I'm only going to hit a few points because there are some general themes I want you to pay attention to here. So, corporate tax going up 7%, and they added a minimum tax on global book income of $100 million or more on the alternative minimum tax for corporations. They're taking away Section 199A deductions from anybody that makes $400,000 or more a year. They're increasing the individual top tax rate from 37% to 39.6%. They're imposing additional Social Security taxes on anybody making $400,000 a year or more. They're reducing the benefits of itemized deductions, etc. The general themes here, you'll see here as well. The general themes here, they're raising taxes on absolutely everybody, especially corporations, and they're taking away any tax reduction or benefits anybody making $400,000 a year or more are getting. If you think that won't trickle down, then you're sorely mistaken. One of the top reasons I hit on that socialism doesn't work is because you take the people out at the top, and then there are no more jobs, or there are fewer jobs. Usually they're worse paying, and you have less tax revenue. Or if you take over a corporation and tax them highly, when they're running out of profits, it just destroys the corporation. And even if it doesn't destroy the corporation, they may have to do things like layoffs or cut hours. This is the kind of thing that we need to be on the lookout for here, especially if they're going to continuously keep raising taxes. I find it rather disgusting playing with people's money, especially when a lot of the things we're doing, it just seem like we're throwing it into a pit. If anybody remembers Cash for Clunkers, or if anybody knows anything about the welfare state a lot of people are in, they're not being helped by these programs. I mean, they're being kept alive, but they're not being encouraged to go out and get a job. They're being encouraged to stay at home and do absolutely nothing all day. I've known a few people on these programs and a few families that have been stuck in this loop, and it's hard to watch sometimes. Oftentimes, they just turn into resentful, angry people, yelling for more money and complaining about how life isn't fair. To their defense, it's not, and that's something we should all remember. There is no fixing life. Now, if you want to learn more about how socialism slowly and then more rapidly spreads and grows and eventually destroys a nation, go ahead and check out my video on how socialism destroys the individual. I'll go ahead and put a link to it in my bio. Let's continue. The House passes the stimulus bill, which is exciting. Biden says that he's ready to sign the bill, which makes sense. What's in this bill? Individuals get $1,400 per person, and it'll reach about 90% of households. Families get an additional $1,400 per child. A married couple with 2 children, for example, could receive up to $5,600 if they're not those evil rich people. The full amount goes to individuals earning less than $75,000 of adjusted gross income, heads of households like single parents earning less than $112,500, and married couples earning less than $150,000. But then the payments phase out as the income goes up, faster than previous stimulus payments. They continue with this, but let's continue with what's in the bill. $300 federal boost to weekly jobless payments and extending 2 key pandemic unemployment benefit programs through September 6th. It will also make the first $10,200 worth of benefit payments tax-free for households with annual incomes less than $150,000. Holy cow. They're expecting people making $150,000 or just under that to be getting $10,200 worth of government payment. And by that I mean taxpayer payments. Out-of-work Americans will start running out of benefits in the two programs this weekend when provisions in December's $900 billion relief package begin phasing out. The $300 enchantment was part of the December deal, also ends this weekend, which is why they're saying this is necessary. Aid to states. The legislation provides $350 billion to states, local governments, territories, and tribes. It will give states and the District of Columbia $195.3 billion, while countries and cities will split about $130 billion in aid. Tribes will get $20 billion and territories $4.5 billion under both bills. The bill also contains $10 billion coronavirus capital projects fund. Okay. Continues, the Democrats want to add another $150 billion, and it says that the package ultimately dropped an initial call to include $160 billion, so they were wanting to include $310 billion more dollars in this package, which I believe would have brought it over $2 trillion. There's nutrition assistance as well, which includes a 15% increase in food stamps. There's housing aid, $20 billion in housing aid, tax credits for families and workers. There's optional paid sick and family leave included, which is really just tax credits to employers who voluntarily add this benefit. It's not actually the government giving that benefit, which is a little bit better. It provides $125 billion to public K-12 schools, and then another $40 billion to colleges. The colleges kind of make sense. Some colleges are having a hard time filling their classes because people are saying, why would I pay $20,000 to $50,000 a year to go to a school that's not even in school? It is very rare to find somebody who learns just the same on online classes. Trust me, I know. But the $125 billion to public schools that haven't even been open, what are they paying for? The kids to stay home? The teachers to stay home? What they're really paying for, of course, is the same reason a lot of schools aren't opening, and that would be the teacher unions. I digress. There's also $39 billion to child care providers. Why? Shouldn't they have made more during this pandemic? Because more people need to send their children to child care providers? Never mind. Whatever. There's also health insurance subsidies and medical aid. And they gave $15 billion to some small businesses, $25 billion to give some grants to bars and restaurants, and the Paycheck Protection Program would be granted an additional $7 billion to help fund that, and another $175 million would go to the outreach and promotion, creating the Community Navigator program to help target eligible businesses. Then $14 billion for vaccines and testing. I know that was long and brutal, but let's talk about some of these wastes of money. For instance, the $125 billion basically going just to support teachers' unions. $20 billion for low-income households, but the biggest thing is the $350 billion going to states, local governments, and territories, while they're also trying to add another $150 billion, but sadly they had to drop out that $160 billion. Listen, California should not be bailed out. New York shouldn't be bailed out. New York, for instance, had times when it had as low as one person who got a new coronavirus case each day. That's insanely low. They should have opened up. It is not our fault that 75% of restaurants in LA have closed. Florida's been open pretty much this entire time, and I believe they're like number 24 or 26 in COVID deaths. There was very little evidence that shutting down saved any lives, and it was obviously political. They do not need bailed out. Plus, I'm pretty sure some of these areas actually got increased tax revenue from these stimulus checks that were sent out. Not to mention, we don't even know where this money is coming from. This money doesn't exist. We are spending more money than has pretty much ever existed. Well, more wealth than has ever existed, I suppose. The government can just print out this money instead of taxing us for it. But as us economists like to say, inflation is the tax that the government puts on you without calling it a tax. By increasing the supply of money, they are decreasing the value of your money. So if you have $100, instead of taking $10 from that $100, what they will do is decrease the worth of it by $10, just as an example. This is a tax, and it will be a big issue within the next 5 to 10 years because we're spending, as Dave Ramsey says, like Congress. I suppose this is what happens when you take a nation of people who don't know how to not be in debt and then have them elect people who don't know how to not be in debt. Look, the scary part about this whole bill, one is that they said it was designed not only to last now, but to last indefinitely. That doesn't mean it's going to. It can still get rejected, but that is how it was designed. This bill is obviously a way to get us comfortable with the government spending an obnoxious amount of money and making us more and more reliant on them. It's sort of the milk before the meat, if you will. It's them trying to condition us to be able to take on the more rough policies. Everything starts slow, everything starts small, but it will snowball and continuously get bigger. As Ronald Reagan said, the only true immortality is a government program. Furthermore, let's just keep writing off the immigration crisis, or the immigration quote-unquote crisis, as CNN seems to put it, and as they talk about what the debate is missing. Now remember, everybody, there are a lot more people at the border than there have ever been. But look at this $1.9 trillion spending bill that Biden just passed to help every man out. Everybody out. Except for those evil rich that we should eat. Give me a break. This is their defense? Let's continue. It's really important to remember that people migrate for many reasons, guys. And who is president of the United States is often not a huge part of the equation. Perhaps not, but it certainly is here. You can tell by the timeline. Let's continue to CNN's expert, Shoishet, who says, I might have pronounced that wrong, guys, by the way. I'm very sorry if I did. Who says, I am very, very careful about using that word, crisis. Because when we call things a crisis, the conversation goes into a pretty hyperbolic place very quickly, where the facts sort of fade into the background and political debate takes over. I've been covering immigration for years, and we've seen periodic frenzy around the border over and over again. At a certain point, you have to ask, is this a crisis? Or is this just a regular migration pattern that ebbs and flows because of a number of factors? You could say really ebbs and flows every 4 to 8 years. Because of a number of factors. But let's give the things that he's paying attention to really quick. A record high number of kids in customs and border protection facilities, and they're being held there longer than the limit, what the law requires. Custom and border protection facilities? I thought those were called cages. Oh, except these are the ones that don't have air conditioning. So I guess they're technically something different. There are still thousands of people waiting in Mexico, many of them in dire and dangerous situations, while their immigration cases make their way through the U.S. Supreme Court because there is just a pileup. Let me tell a quick story. I have a friend who used to live in California. She decided she wanted an internship at some government facility. So she went ahead and did that. It was approving building permits and digging permits and stuff like that. They were 3 months backed up. In 2 days, she went through the entire 3 months of backed up paperwork. But she was told that she was working too hard and that if she continues to do this, she would be fired. She was later fired. I'm not necessarily going to blame the record high number of kids or the record high number of migrants arriving at the border. I'm not necessarily going to blame them. I'm going to blame the government facility for the backup in these cases because I frankly don't believe that they are doing what they can to get through it because they don't have to. Their job is secured. Who's going to get rid of these government operations? Nobody. They're necessary and they're monopolistic. There is no competition and therefore there is no need to get better. As Thomas Sowell puts it, years of conservative economic classes were not enough to stop Thomas Sowell from being a socialist and a Marxist. What eventually did it was his one summer internship at a government facility and seeing who his heroes were supposed to be. Just a little ramble from me there. Let's continue. This is a fast-moving situation, and we're still waiting to learn more about what the Biden administration is doing. No, we're not. We know they're ignoring it. That's what they're doing. Finish this sentence. The single best metric to watch as it relates to when we will know the border situation is improving is Schultz says, I'll take a stab at answering that question, but one thing that I would like to point out first is that we get really caught up in numbers and data. Not numbers and data about the border because it's information that's really readily available, and of course it gives us some sort of big picture indicator of the situation. But these are people's lives we are talking about, many of whom have fled danger, or who are desperately seeking economic opportunities, or who are doing what they can to survive, yada yada yada. Okay, now I'll fill in that blank. I'd say at this moment, the best metric to watch is a number our colleague Priscilla Alvarez has been following very closely. The number of kids in CBP custody and the average length of time they're being held. I actually agree with him there. Wow. I didn't think that I would. It's a great metric to go by, and frankly, it shows how careless the Biden administration has been in this area. I believe they have 100% more children in CBP. I thought we called them cages. Am I not allowed to call that anymore? Is that like racist or something? I mean, Dr. Seuss is racist. Cages is probably racist, right? Whatever. That was CNN. We have Politico saying that fears of border crisis fuel tension in Congress. And they give a fairly good article that you guys can go ahead and read, where they're talking about, well, it's Politico, so you can imagine the side that they're taking, but they're really talking about how one side is very aggressive and that this is an issue, and the other side is slowly being forced to accept that this is an issue. We're only barely a few months into this administration, and some scary, horrifying policies are being put in place. What's coming up next? I'm going to guess higher taxes, probably some more positive rights allotted to people. And by positive rights, I don't mean that they're good. By positive rights, I mean the government gets more rights. They have more right to punish you for things. My guess is that hate speech bill will probably be tried to be passed. My guess is that Obamacare will try to extend into the private sector. And who knows what else is to come. Anyway, guys, I tried to get into more serious politics today to see how you'd like it. Let me know what you wanted me to touch on more, what you thought I should touch on less, what I did well, what I didn't do well. Let me know what you think about what the Biden administration has been doing for the past few months and where you think that they're going. I am the Reasonable Conservative. Thank you for listening. Go ahead and click like, that subscribe button, hit the little bell so you know when I'm posting. Check out my Patreon and my Instagram. And go ahead and watch my other videos. Watch my video on socialism, have that explained to you a little better. Watch my video on why the left hates diversity, and see where America is headed if we stay on this path. And most importantly, have a great day.